Professor Yeshiku has received a number of distinctions. These include, but not limited to, Senior Fulbright Research Scholar of the United States of America in 1996, Fulbright alumni in Award of the Federal Government of Nigeria in 1982. His research activities have taken him to over 87 countries in Africa, Europe, Asia, and North America. North America and over 300 major cities in the world. Wow. Professor Yeshiku belongs to several professional and academic bodies, including the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners, MNITP, Town Planners Registration Council of Nigeria, RTP, World Conference of Transport Research, MWCTRS, Nigerian Geographical Association, NGA, and American Studies Association of Nigeria, MASAN. He is also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, FCILT, and a fellow of the Institute of Transport Administration of Nigeria, PITA. A seasoned academic university administrator, he was provost of the College of Engineering and Environmental Sciences, Untitled Chapter University of Education, Natresl, Ijagun, Ijebu, Ogun State, in March 2005. The position he held in March 2010 as Vice Chancellor. Oyeshiku had a track record of transforming people citadel of learning and left a legacy of turning Nigeria's premier university of education into an architectural masterpiece. In 2010, immediately after completing his tenure as Vice Chancellor at Natresl, Oyeshiku was appointed as Executive Secretary of the Ogun State Bureau of Tertiary Institutions, a position he held in September 2012. As Executive Secretary, Oyeshiku, among other duties, helped to provide the Ogun State government with the appropriate policy to guide on the development of tertiary and higher education institutions in the state. He also assisted all the tertiary institutions to network on linkages with organized private sector and international higher education institutions, as well as assist the tertiary institutions in the state to source for grants for research and development. Apart from his passion for the academia, Professor Yeshiku is a great sports enthusiast. He constructed and donated an Olympic standard tennis court to the university as a patent gift to Natresl sporting staff and students, which was commissioned in March 2010, having been captain of Gateway Tennis Club for several years. Professor Yeshiku, Professor Oyeshiku, for a great scholar and a great researcher, a model for some of us who are still coming at Professor Oyeshiku for this plethora of achievements and laurels that he has acquired in the academia. Thank you very much.
We are yielding the space to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. My distinguished colleagues and audience, let me first of all express my sincere appreciation for the invitation that you extended to me since last year. I feel highly honored that I'm invited to be part and parcel of this particular great conference. I also want to thank the Professor Fupopola for writing so briefly of what I'm not too sure I am. I felt so belittled to be among you this morning. May I request the person in charge of the console if I can share the screen for my slides, or if it's something that he wants to do on his own and it can follow me in my presentation. Does he want to do that? Or he wants to? Yes, he has actually disabled me from sharing my screen. Okay, I guess good. Right. Once again, my distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the topic I'm going to look at is the innovations and transformations in the teaching and learning of the English language, particularly for sustainable development. I guess why I'm actually speaking on this is because of my strong bias in sustainable development goals, preparation and implementation. I'm glad to let you know that between 2013 and 2015, the United Nations packed us together to prepare this particular goal. I'm equally glad that I'm part of the implementation since 2015. And I can then relate it to the language that will be able to convey it in the most appropriate way, which is English. Going by the outline, I have about 8 major subheadings, but I will go very briefly for each and every one of them. I have to develop along with you the concept of the development and see how sustainable development then comes on board, and then beginning to treat the innovations that English language can adopt and look directly to the different technologies for this particular purpose before I can conclude. The sustainable development paradigm deals with how people live their lives in such a way that they can leave certain legacies for those that are coming behind. Specifically, it looks at people, it looks at our planet, it looks at our prosperity and how we can share peace and partnership. English is still the most common language of communication, that it is dominant, at least based on my limited experience of participating in sustainable development goals implementation. One of those the commonest of those language is actually English. And therefore, English is taken as the lingua franca for sustainable development. A number of the reports that also have been published are actually come through English language. And therefore, how this can be sandwiched along with sustainable development goals is what I am going to present this afternoon. I want to start with the concept of the development. We have a misconception that development simply is by the economic evaluation of the gross domestic product per capita, that if our GDP is increasing, if there is no recession, then we are developing. I am trying to put it across as a number of scholars across the world have envisaged that self-reliance, particularly how we do not see accelerated growth as the main determinant of development. Specifically, we should see development as a process of reducing the inequality and the eradication of of poverty. In other words, it is the ability to provide basic needs for the generality of the people, and for the people to see themselves as having a self-esteem in terms of freedom and servitude, ability and to choose what we want and how we want it is perhaps should be the focus of the concept of development. In other words, three major pillars actually hold development anywhere in the world. Increase the ability for the basic life sustenance, food, shelter, and protection, and our ability to raise the level of our standard of living. In other words, we want a better health, better housing, better education. And the third is to create our attention to our humanistic value. In other words, development is about material well-being and a way to generate a greater self-esteem for our people. Of course, this must come within the ambit, freedom from servitude. We are looking at this concept of the development as highlighted by the United Nations, sometimes in 1972, the Rio de Janeiro conference that brings about the need to gather the impetus for the development across the world. And of course, the focus of those for that particular gathering is the developing countries, in a way that you can see development as growth plus a positive change in whatever we do, our production techniques, our consumer behavior, and our latitude to freedom. After that particular conference in 1972, by 1980 or so, the United Nations also came together and to bring about the concept of sustainable development, out of which we have the Millennium Development Goal, which was actually to terminate sometimes in 2015. But something that was very, very clear in the Millennium Development Goal was that it does not actually become an encompassing issue, though this has been foreseen in the Rio de Janeiro 1992 conference and that of the Istanbul in 1996. Therefore, the concept of sustainable development was brought about as a paradigm to replace what is the generic of the concept of development as a whole. And sustainable development is to ensure that all productive sectors of the national economy make a positive and enduring impact. Again, the difficulty that may actually arise is the isolation of sustainable development goal process, particularly from the third world countries. The sustainable development would then became much more popularized since the early 1990s up to the middle of the 2000 millennium. Against this particular background, the sustainable development goals arising from the Millennium Development Goals simply advocates that we should not limit anything that we have to do through technology and social organization, but consider, more importantly, environmental resources and our ability for us to have a greater effect on human activities. Against that particular background, there were 17 goals that I have stated, right? Poverty, hunger, education, reduction and inequality, so on and so forth. But I want to go a step further by looking at what does each and every one and how does English language can convey appropriately what these particular aspects of the goal. Goal number one actually targets virtually everybody, because over 60% of the population of the world are in one level of poverty or the other, except that we have over 25% that is in abject poverty. Goal number two is about food security and agriculture. Goal number 3 ensures that we live in good condition and the promotion of well-being for for those
Exato. Muita coisa. Exato, não. Exato, não. Exato, não. Yes, exactly.
No problem, we are still with you. We can't hear you again.
now. Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you. Sorry for that particular break technically. Right. Now I'm actually on goal number 5 and goal number 6. Right. Goal number 7, it's about energy, and goal number 8 is inclusive, sustainable growth and employment. That is purely economic. Number 9 is the commencement of the environment, proper resilient infrastructure and promotion of industrialization that can protect the environment. Number 10 is general inequality by gender, race, religion. 11 is about city development. 12 is about consumption process, which is also linked to number 3 and 4, agriculture, health, and education. Number 13 is about climate change, the focus of what is going on right now in Glasgow. Number 15 and 16 are focusing on ecology, justice. And number 7 is the partnership, which I guess is the objective of what you are doing right away. There are pockets of researches across the world that searches for the extent of knowledgeability and ability to teach classes and understand what generally this sustainable development is. I want to make a comparison of 2 major areas. There is one in Kosovo and there is another one from Nigeria. How do we consider that the generality of the people understand the sustainable development goal knowledge? And from that part of the world, only 40% actually do not have any knowledge. 60% of them do have, and their focus is in the 3 major areas: quality of education, good health, and gender inequality. The other aspect, which is about people, planet, and places, were not actually on their focus. In respect of Nigeria, similar studies could be extracted from Justice, Development and Peace Commission project in 2019, just about 2 years ago, when 37 of the respondents only have knowledge of the sustainable development. Again, they are also looking at the quality of education, well-being, and of course, and good enough, they also focus to some extent on peace and partnership. One big question that comes up: what are the challenges of those that are teaching and are learning in English in all this. The challenges and the competitiveness for the professionals that are in language, English for that particular matter, on sustainable development is to the extent to teach sustainable development as a veritable tool for the development of the society. But in what ways can this actually be done? Learner also needs to develop attitudes and the knowledge and the skill beyond the traditional way or indigenous knowledge that can adapt to higher education in the teaching of English for this particular goal. Professionals then have to possess some interactive competencies rather than just disciplinary, separated and rapidly outdated knowledge of how we can catch up with sustainable development using English as a particular medium. Sustainability of development through the goal cannot be possible without actually means of communication. And English language is also a system that connects not only our time but space. Moreover, and more importantly, language is also a system that connects the people and link up a pathway to the culture of understanding what is being conveyed. Therefore, sustainable development goals education itself must be able to concentrate on linguistics education, equipping our global village and those within the nationality, the instrument to enable us to function very well. There are basically three spheres of the sustainability, which are environmental, social, and socio-cultural, which the diagrams that follow will actually depict. The spheres of interest, right, that is spheres of the sustainability are equally very much treated. When you look at that particular model of creative communicating competence, we see the areas where concentration is actually expected. We have the sociolinguistics, we have the empirical, and we have the pragmatic. On both sides, at both ends, is actually functional competence and socio-cultural competence. If you use the inductive approach and you use the deductive approach, whichever approach that it is actually used, you can still arrive at the same thing. But what is very critical is that cultural sociolinguistics and empirical competency are very critical in ensuring that communication is achieved. And that communication can better be appreciated very much. You can divide the pillars of sustainability into environment, economic, and socio-cultural. The one that is actually convey communication so easily is the socio-cultural aspect through English language learning. Now, innovation in English language teaching. I want to seek your indulgence to, well in advance. I'm not a teacher of English, right? But as a communication in English throughout my life from age 5, I think I understand some little about English. And on reading through the literature in relation to sustainable development, I can then piece these things together. Hello? Hello?
We can hear you, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Sometimes it's giving me a false alarm.
We're sharing from here, sir, your slides.
Oh, okay. Good. I guess it's clear now. I guess it's clear now.
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. I was actually on slide number 23, slide number 24, to relate what kind of innovation that can be bottom down. And I was stating that innovation in language education, right, is to generate interests of the people, particularly the learners. And from the example that I draw out, the UK perspective is establishing the management of some type of changes that in the education structure that reform and insight into practicability of understanding that particular language. Rogers identified 3 major related categories facing innovation as far as English language is concerned. The one that focuses on the teacher, which is the lack of teacher ownership to understand what innovation is all about. 2 is the system related, that is within the environment with which that passes across that communication, meaning that poor communication and lack of mutual trust between the teacher and those that are receiving may form a particular barrier. 3, the school. In other words, what are the supportive infrastructure and services that can ensure that innovation can be brought about? The barriers are actually mitigated by effective institutional-based professional development. In other words, if, like we are having in this particular workshop, imbibe within the professionals the necessary support that can culturally bring about some of those learning strategies for English, for those that are actually learning to understand what is being talking about. Following the series of short case studies that I have tried to bring about, technology normally has a significant role that can play to enhance the delivery. There is no doubt about that. But we must actually be very, very careful the extent to which the technology will encourage the development and acquisition perfectly of that particular language. To some extent, it is both positive and it is negative. But when technology is properly utilized by the teachers and the learners, we gain a lot. If not, it is becoming like a disaster. There are many different technologies that are used as brought about by the experts on English for specific purposes. The technology plays an essential role, particularly towards the learners. We have all sorts of social media contacts that can enhance electronically our literary skills, but that may not be sufficient alone. As those that are putting the development across, we must then guide as teachers of the language the extent to which we need to go. Those advantages include the following, but it's not actually limited to what they have. I have identified out of those 14, 6 that are of great germane. Number 2 is to understand our socio-cultural aspects of the languages as practiced in the various fields and in the various professions. With a number of my colleagues, particularly those that are really teaching, we have had social media language coming into the proper English language in our assessment and evaluation of our students. Now, by the time you mark essays, you find some of those shortcuts of those languages. Therefore, we must be able to guide our students what is most appropriate. Number 4 is that it also provides some strategies for the development that are metacolizing what they are supposed to speak and how they are going to put it across. Number 6 is to use proper method and materials. Of course, there are a numerous software that can be put across to the students. But I mean, particularly for those of us that are handling general studies, we should be able to get this across virtually to the spectrum, throughout the spectrum of the institutions, polytechnic colleges of education and the universities, what those technologies can do to enhance our writing, listening, and speaking skills. Technology normally will facilitate the focus practice for language development. Then it will meet our effective needs for our self-esteem and the ability to do this. And finally, provide appropriate feedback for mechanism if it is used properly, very, very, very well. Now, my concluding remark before I begin to highlight the difference between innovation, change, and transformation. Right. To some extent, our institutions of learning alone cannot be left to make the difficulty of the process of the transformation, but only to support the policies that have been in place. We should then become an influencer to the policies of those institutions to ensure that proper technology is actually infused into the system to bring about innovation that it is necessary. And without innovation, if you keep innovation in vacuum, as it emerges over time, we are going to lose the track. In the recent years, the emergent education industry have taken a proper important lead, just like we are doing. But much of those lead has tended towards commercial corporate interests rather than real education and learning. To foster innovation, we must do better than what is on ground. We must imbibe the necessary skill, particularly creative thinking and creativity. My joy today is that a number of the people that are in the language, learning and teaching are very, very creative. They are also part of the school of the critical thinking in the overall system, irrespective of the profession or line. And therefore, they can bring about necessary approaches that can bring practice to innovation into form. We should then have to influence government, as I said, those that are in charge of policy, to develop the innovation strategies that can imbibe proper languages that can communicate with those that are in the sustainable development field in such a way that we'll be able to understand what development is all about, what sustainable goals and development is all about, and the meaning that it portends to the society. Right. Now, we want to compare three things in terms of what we mean, which has actually transpired in the course of this presentation. We have mentioned transformation, innovation, and change. If we see development as change, positive change, advancement and positive change, then innovation becomes very necessary through one form of reformation or the other. Innovation is just implementation of some new ideas that has come into a play, and it brings about novelty, something that it is new, but the benefits that it brings must be positive. That is the key characteristics, and that particular process is, as stated, it comes on in form of marketing, it comes in form of radical or systemic form. Reformation and the transformation are structured processes, which is expected to produce some specific change. In many cases, it is usually very radical. It's not something that it could come out with just a fiat. Finally, the change itself is transformational. In other words, it has altered the way we look at things generally. It must also have to be put within the context of historical development and the context of what we are talking about. The types of the change must actually bring about differentiation. It must also sustain what we need to do over time. My distinguished audience, I want to thank you for listening, and I'll be willing to take some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Yeah, I hereby calling for questions from those who have joined virtually. Please, can you signify if you have any questions to ask each paper presenter, Professor Michiko? Wave your hand if you have a question. Or you may also choose to type it in the chat.
Okay.
box. Is there anyone with a question for Professor Michiko? How about those of us who are physically present here?
Thank you very much, sir, for an exciting and challenging presentation. My question is about this idea of innovation and transformation. Given the context, my name is Peter Ribayabo from the Federal University of Technology, Akure. Given the context of the Nigerian situation and language teaching, English language teaching, that is, there are so many constraints. Even to the most willing language teacher, the constraints are so enormous that when you talk about innovation and transformation, it becomes very difficult. Yet, the development goals are there, and Nigeria has signed up to be able to meet these development goals. We as an association, we want to push and try to educate, train our teachers within our limits to be able to adopt innovative methods, teaching methods, research methods, in order to be able to transform our society so that education becomes a tool that has an impact in getting our people out of poverty, out of hunger, out of disease, so that Nigeria can get up the social ladder. How do you think we can get our governments, our schools, and society at large to assist in our achieving our goals as teachers of the language? Thank you, sir.
Anyone, you may want to answer that, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Aborishade, particularly for the initial comments on the Nigerian situation and the difficulties in getting the message across. If I get your question right, sir, how to get across to the government and those in the authority to assist to enhance the development of the language. My immediate reaction is that most of us are in one position or the other of opportunity that can become an influencer in getting these things across. We are in a country, generally speaking, where those that come into authority or those that come into power actually have fixated mind on what they want to do. And therefore, when they were there, whenever they are there, they hardly bothered about certain inputs that can enhance even the development of the environment which they are. Well, most of us are also on the social media, one platform or the other. Any form of innovation that we think it is right, we can begin to galvanize such ideas, and maybe somehow opportunities that we have, particularly those that are anchoring sustainable development goals at the state, at the national level, they can be veritable agents in getting across some of these innovations to those people. What I can assure everyone is that for those that are involved in the states, in most states, right, they are our colleagues, they are professorial academic colleagues who have been doing a yeoman's job selflessly to get across the major tenets of development goals. But the innovations that can come through language to enhance understanding of those development goals actually rest on their hands. And I'm sure as we move from one stage, from the stage of the state to the federal, from the federal to the United Nations, or thereabout, this message can be passed across. We need not actually rest on our horse, despite the difficulties and the challenges that we face in ensuring that we have a good governance through the implementation of sustainable development goals.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Kelly Bodike. I'm not really asking a question. I just want to maybe open up a bit about what Prof has said. I want to believe that Prof has talked to us about language, knowledge dissemination, and development. And when we talk about development, we are talking about a change. Let this to education itself. Education is a relatively change in behavior as a result of experience. And the experience we are talking about is that the individual is taught. And that's what will bring the change in behavior. So we are talking about development. I want to believe that particularly those of us that are teachers, we are influencers. Because I know the number of students we face every day or in a session. And so we are in a position, as a matter of fact, to expose them to the sustainable development goals. And I think the first step towards this, even as language teachers, we should, as much as possible, take effort to learn about the development, the sustainable development goals. Then we now know as a person, because one of the slogan is that nobody should be left behind. And I think as lecturers, as teachers of English, we can't be left behind. And by doing this, we also make effort to learn about the development goals and see what we can do on our own part, even when we are educating our students, to teach them about these goals. And language is a very powerful tool for this purpose. Of course, we are teachers of English. And remember, we are teachers of English as a second language. It implies that we also have another language, which would be any of the indigenous languages. It could be our mother tongue, it could be our first language. It means that we can also influence our students via these other languages. And there are various communities that will also be able, to relate to their parents, to relate to people around them, what development, sustainable developmental goals, is. And so, as teachers of English, our major responsibility, wherever we are, we must make sure that we find our way through the various NGOs that are available or through those who are in developmental line, or those who are in the CSO, so that we can collaborate with them. We can also have projects with them in which we can use to really make sure that we are not left behind, and as influencers, we also have our own contributions. Our students also do projects. Our projects will target even some of the developmental goals, so that they go to some communities and find out and use the language, you know, to come up with something that is reasonable. So I believe that as teachers, we make our efforts, and people say the reward of teachers is in heaven. It's right there on earth, because at a point in time, you won't even be recognized where you are for your contributions and what you have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
I don't know whether you want to add to that, sir.
What I need to add is to thank Professor Bodunde, and that is one big advantage you can have when you get a senior sister who can take his aburo very seriously. Thank you, ma.
I'm still with you. Oh, is there any other question that would you like to ask? Any question? What? Okay. Prof, we are grateful for your presentation. So
thank you very much.
Please you now. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you too. Bye-bye.
So we go straight to the next section of our opening program, which will be about 2 workshops. The very first one, I don't know whether Professor workshops by 2 o'clock.